Writers, readers, drinkers, lend me your ears and your livers. Welcome to Writers Drinking Whiskey Open Bar, your boozy author panel where we say every third sentence with a pirate accent. I am your host, William R. Hincy, and as always, we have a really great panel here. So let's introduce them. So, panel, let's start with you, with the new guest here, because I was joking before the show started that John Gilstrap, Dario Ciriello is with us. I was trying to figure out who's been on more episodes to give them the gold seal, stamp of approval, but we'll figure that out for next episode. But we got Mr. Stephen Hunter with us. Steve, so let me give you the brief one I had here. So the latest book was Front Sight. And if I remember right up here, we'll have little links to your episode. So anyone watching that wants to catch the full Stephen Hunter experience can click on that. But the latest book's Front Sight. You also, and I like to mention this because this is the thing, and I told you during the show, it makes you very cool. You were on Siskel and Ebert.
Well, except it was Siskel and Roper when I was there. No. It actually was neither Siskel or Roper. It was Roper and me. Poor Roger Gene had passed, and Roger had throat cancer, and he could no longer speak. Though I did have dinner with him and his wife, and he would write notes furiously and hand me these yellow notes. And then he and his wife got in a fight, and he would write notes, and she would say, "No, that's ridiculous." And he didn't write it on a note. And it was better than any movie I saw that year. So yes, I did do that show.
Very good. So my question, fun question for today, and is it used to be a standard question I asked on the show, but I stopped many moons ago, so I thought it might be a fun icebreaker here. So, what is your biggest pet peeve?
Well, we started with people who ask us to read their books. This is before the show proper started, and I don't know if that's the biggest. The biggest pet peeve I would have is death. And then after that, I would say failure. And then, I don't know, when my wife is really acting up, that's terrible. And, but no, I don't really, it's awkward when people ask you to become their sponsors and get them published. And I have a little joke. I say indulge me, please, guys, and then I'll shut up. I say to them, I have a wonderful plan to get you published. And if you follow it explicitly, you will be published. There's only one tricky part, and that's turning the calendar back to 1977. But other than that, it's real easy. So that's a peeve. So let's hear some other peeves.
Oh, very good. So let's move on to Dana King. Dana. Welcome. So I know the latest book, and correct me if I get these latest books wrong here, but Dana, I would check the website, should still be Off the Books, which was book 6 in the Nick Forte series.
Yep, that's it.
All right. Nailed it. All right. And sir, what is your pet peeve?
My pet peeve anymore is, and this can happen with, it happens in not just in newspapers, but on the internet a lot. Stephen probably can relate to this, I haven't seen it, is too many places bury the lead. Just to give a trivial example, I'll be reading an article about last night's baseball game, and I won't get the score till the third paragraph. They'll have this happened, that happened. Oh yeah, and by the way, the Orioles won 6-4. The score of the game, or it should be the first thing in there. And if you're reading an article about any news event, the first paragraph should have the stuff I really need to know so I can decide if I'm going to read the rest of the article or not. And that seems to be a dying art. And full disclosure, I'm not a journalist, so it's got so bad it bothers me, and I don't understand a lot of this stuff. So that's probably mine.
Mm-hmm. It's the clickbait phenomenon. Like you just see it everywhere now. It's just to try to get you to click on it, and then you have to scroll through the banner ads to get to whatever the content is.
You just gave me another pet peeve. Actually, I'll throw two in there. The internet needs editors. It just seems to me that because even with a columnist, because they no longer have the restriction of how many inches are available, too many of them just go on and on and on. It's like, well, I lost interest a while ago. You need to give me 15 examples of this. 3 would have done. So yeah, those are my 2 things.
Good. Thank you for that. And then we'll get to our returning guest here. So Dario Ciriello. So Dario is editor extraordinaire, of course. Books-wise, you wrote the 2 thrillers, Sutherland's Rules and Black Easter. And then you have the best-selling memoir. I always want to say, is it Aegean Dream or is it Aegean?
Aegean.
Aegean. Okay. So I know it's one of those words when you think you get it wrong, even when you say it right, you can never wrap your brain around it. So
say it with a British accent and it always sounds right.
Yes, that's good. Good points. I may switch to mine shortly. So anyway.
Well, I'll do our British accent as Dario. You do your American accent.
Let's go on, lads. Okay, that's enough.
Also, Dario, what's your biggest pet peeve?
Wow, let me count the ways. There are so many. The main thing is I've got to an age where I just it's all noise. I don't get too worked up over any of it because you just go insane. But there's so much on an individual, personal level, whether it's friendship or work. I think flakiness really bothers me. Flakiness and people who waste other people's time. But really, there are so many. I mean, I could say the 21st century. That would pretty much cover most of it. And certainly social media. But don't get me started on that. So that's kind of an overview. But let's save 21st century and we're done.
Right. I love that. That's a great pet peeve, actually. Awesome. And so let's move on to, I forget what I described you as last time, John. I think it was the man, the myth, the legend. So it's not the most original, but I'm going to stick to it. Yeah, I'm going to stick with it. So I think the latest book, I think it was over 30 books now. I think we talked about last time. The latest was Harm's Way still.
And I know it depends on when this airs. I think the newest one is going to be called Zero Sum.
Okay, very good. Good point, actually, because it'll end up airing. And I know you had a book that you were due to turn in. So that was coming up real close. Maybe you can give us the update on where that is and then let us know your pet peeve.
I did Burned Bridges was that book. I got it turned in 5 days early, which I don't remember the last time I was able to do that. That's good. My pet peeve, I'm going to go with 2 of them right now. The first one, more societal, is the forced tipping thing that's happening now. You're standing at the counter and they spin that little thing around and it wants me to give them a 20% tip. I actually want to take money off of what I owe at that point. It just annoys me. Even table service, I'm actually a good tipper. But I'm tempted when they're suggesting these tips to me. I don't. I try not to be an ass. But I'm more successful than not. I don't know. Just the whole forced tipping thing is annoying. The other one kind of cuts close to what we were talking about before with movies. I haven't been to a theater in, I don't know, a long, long time. But we built our dream house here in the woods, and we have a theater in the house. So we have other televisions that we can watch, but you go in the theater, in the room, the projection room, and you sit there. That is to watch a movie. And the family gets this, right? The dog doesn't always, but it's a dog. It's when you bring in neighbors and they want to talk in the middle of the movie. And it's not like about the movie. It's like a random thought that they have in their head that is somehow so freaking important that they have to mention it in the middle of dialogue. I actually will get nasty with them and say, this is actually literally a no talking zone. So you live with it or you need to leave.
Very good. It's good that you don't go to movie theaters because now everyone has their phones out because that random thought now must be, transmitted out to cyberspace. So you see all the little screens light up. And I haven't had it. I have talked to people that have gone to movies that people have just been plain talking. But I so far haven't had that bad experience with it. But
on Friday, I went to fireworks in Harper's Ferry here, and No, fireworks are fireworks. They're fairly entertaining. They're fairly short. And there was this asshat that was right down here, right down at kind of an elevated location. And this guy was down on my left, turned sideways through the entire fireworks. He was using the searchlight on his phone to read a book all through the fireworks. You have there's this bright white light that's glowing down in the lower left quadrant through the fireworks.
Right. And then you looked and saw it was one of your books, and you're like, "That's fine, it pass." You know, good man.
Oh, there's that.
Very good. Thanks for that, everyone. Awesome. So let's get to round one here, which means I need to scroll on the paper because I don't remember what the question was. There it is. So round one question here is: how do you immerse the reader? So methods, tools, examples, wherever we want to take it. And so maybe then we'll just go with the order that you guys are appearing on my screen here. So Dana, do you want to give us the start?
Sure, I'll take a shot at it. There are a couple of things I try to do. The first thing is I try to give them a situation. This is going to sound corny, but I mean, you want to kind of like imply a question that they're going to want to know the answer to. And then I'm picking this up right now because I just saw an interview with Lee Child where he talks about this, and that's good enough for me. And I realize I do try to do that. That you kind of imply a question. You don't have to ask it directly, but you imply it, and then you don't answer it. You'll answer it eventually. It may be 4 or 5 chapters down the road. It may not be the end of the book, but you want them wondering about that. But the other thing I find that they need to do is they have to care about something. They don't have to like the main character, but they have to care what happens to him or her. And they have to want to see how that comes up. And if I can get those two things done, and if I can also find a way, this really sounds stupid, but basically if I can find a way to entertain them, and even if maybe they're not quite getting the story or they're not quite sure how they feel about it yet, they're just enjoying reading the writing, I find that they will tend to want to go on with that. So those are the 3 things I try to get in there to try to get them hooked. And then after a while, after the first 40 or 50 pages, the story and the book are going to live or die on their own merits. But those are the things I want to do to get them in there, to get them engrossed. And hopefully then they may forgive a few things down the road.
Good. Well, thank you for that. John, you want to take us from there?
Yeah, I think reading is, I always call it a magical process because they're really just spots on the page and somehow they become movies in your head. And I think that's the flow of the language. And it's a very delicate balance that to create a syntactical flow. I don't know, it sounds haughty. I don't mean it that way, but creating that voice that resonates within the reader's head while having interesting characters doing interesting things in interesting ways. And it's finding that balance and to find a vocabulary and a language that is consistent unto itself, so that even the narrative parts of a story are revealing of character. I write in a very close third person, so I like to think that I'm invisible. So even the narrative part of the story is told through the third person voice as if it's a first person voice of the character. And actually, one of the people I have learned from is sitting right below me on the screen here. That Steve Hunter does a terrific job of that. And Steve writes stuff that's set like the most recent one I read. I'm sorry, Steve, I don't remember the title of it. It's okay. 3 books in one, where you got essentially
I can't remember
dead. And you choose not an archaic language, it's a language of the 30s, and you're consistent to it. And it sort of becomes the soundtrack of that section, which then becomes something different as you move on. And so we're talking about the immersion of the story. That's all part of it. And all we have to work with are spots on the page. And it's those little details of word choice and the physical details, not of the characters for me, but of the things that they see and the things they do and the things they smell. That's what brings the reader in, but it's as fragile as a single word choice to get them ejected out. And that's the delicate balance to find. I hope any of that made sense.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I like that you brought up too, like smelling and things too. Because I think a lot of times those senses, because like I think sometimes writers do themselves a disservice when they try to make a movie. And it's like, the movie you get sound, you get all the visuals, all fed to you, but you get all those senses that you write about when you're reading. So taste and smell and those things that they don't get, and the internal monologue, all of those things. So it's a great point. Steve, you want to take us from there?
Yeah, I was a little worried about this question because you're asking me to be rational about something that is basically instinctive. And I don't like to look under my own hood. I don't like to see how and why I do the stuff that I do, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. I'm the kind of guy, kind of writer who I just turn the faucet and the torrent comes gushing out. And when I get tired, I turn it off. And sometimes further down the line, I'm going to examine that. I will say that John deployed a very key concept, and that was balance. One of the things we're paid to do is balance action and exposition and character and stink and going to the back. We're just sort of trying if we overdo any one thing, it somehow twists the whole piece off. And so, and again, I think that's to the degree that one is gifted. That's a gift that can't be taught. That's maybe the difference between those of us lucky enough to publish and those many who are not lucky enough to publish. They don't quite see the play of those elements in relationship to each other and overdo one or the other. And the follow on from that, again, try to be brief here, is that you've got to know your own strengths. You've got to have a real sit down, come to Jesus talk with yourself as a writer and understand what you do well. I could not do a family breakfast scene if you put a gun to my head. If it was a Marine sniper breakfast scene, I could do that okay, I guess. But you've got to write to your strengths and not your weaknesses, understanding that you will nevertheless sooner or later have to deal with those weaknesses. And then what you try to do is fool the reader into thinking you know what you're talking about. And that's a part of it too.
There you go. Thank you for that. That actually reminds me, I think, Dana, on your episode, I think we talked about that a bit, was that you kind of found your strengths. So we're like, I'm just going to focus on this. And I always think that's great advice. I think there was a sentiment for a while where it was always like, find your weaknesses and strengthen those weaknesses, and which, okay. I mean, not that you should not know what your weaknesses are and not try to mitigate against them, but I think a lot of times finding what you're good at and just steering towards what you're good at is a great advice. And I think more fulfilling for you as an individual than trying to work on the thing you're not good at all of the time.
I think finding your weaknesses and working on them is great if you're a student or it's a writing exercise. But if you want people to pay money to read the book, you need to give them your best effort. You work on that stuff on your own time.
Sure. Amen. Also, Dario, you want to take us from there?
Yeah. Dana, I agree with you 100%. You kind of stole my thunder in the best possible way. And, the openings to me aren't that hard. I think endings are really hard. But to me, the opening is more a matter of not screwing it up than doing something special. So they always say open with action, which is the most stupid writing advice, along with show, don't tell, because it's so easily misunderstood. I always say open with questions, which is exactly pretty much what you said. So raise questions and keep that up, raising more than you answer. Yes, you need to answer them at the right point. And secondly, maybe firstly, actually, make the reader care. It, doesn't matter whose life is in danger in the first page or first chapter. If the reader doesn't care about the character, it's worthless. And that's my biggest problem with a great many published books, movies, shows, etc. I just get a little way in, and I'm not patient. If they don't get me on board and immerse me right away, I'm done. It's my time's too precious. So, and I think the third thing, I think John raised it, is voice, whether it's character or narrative voice. The voice is its own hook. If an author's voice is really powerful, or the character voice is compelling, you can talk. You can describe the workings of a shoe factory, and the reader will stick with you. So to me, those are the key things. And someone else, I think it might have been Steve, mentioned entertainment. And I think that's the beauty of the novel, is that it gives us time for entertainment, for those sidebars, for those reflections on life, for things which aren't directly material to the story or obvious, but nonetheless enrich it and keep the reader interested while everything else is building up. So, questions, voice, and make the reader care.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I would double back on something that Steve had mentioned before that I think needs to be emphasized, because I know there are a lot of new writers and struggling writers, wannabe writers, for lack of a better term. That's a disrespectful term. I don't mean it that way. That watch this, and that is to don't overthink this process. If writing is something you want to do, trust that you have an ability to do it, and let the words flow. I think one of the problems that I have encountered in teaching, I don't do a lot of it, but when I do the writers' workshops and stuff, a lot of MFA candidates and MFA graduates are really constipated creatively because they've been trained to think way too hard about this stuff. And it's almost like they've hammered the fun out of the writing process. And I really encourage people just to kind of let it go and let it. I don't know. I don't like calling myself an artist just because it seems haughty, but that's what artists do. I mean, you have your own point of view and let it be there, and don't break its spirit by working it over too hard.
Yeah. Right. A lot of people, if I may just emphasize that, a lot of people think they have to become someone else when they write, and they adopt what they think is a writer's voice. And it's not their voice, and it separates them from themselves and from whatever has formed them. And I've always told, when I am asked, I will politely say to them, you have to be yourself. What you're selling, basically, even though we seldom recognize it, is our own innate, talents or dreams or fantasies or whatever. And if we stifle that, if we bury that under some presumed professional, professorial, formalized voice, we're never gonna. We're just the work will never work.
Amen. I actually, when I was early on I had kids. I was 19 when I had my first daughter, so I had children while I was going to college, and I published short stories, things like that, pretty early on. And was doing, for that age and for having kids and stuff, doing fairly well, with it. And then as I progressed through college and going to this like deep reading of everything and this deep, I hated everything I wrote. I didn't like sitting down and writing it. And I finally just went, F this, and like put all of it out of my mind. And then started publishing again, but there's just a gap to where nothing would get accepted anymore and everything. And I was like, of course not. I hate this, like this, and so I think there is a real danger to overthinking everything, that there's kind of a prepare and then let it rip. That's what I do with the show. Like I'll prepare a lot, but then once we're on, I'm just going to let it rip. I just trust that the preparation, this is all lies and propaganda. There's no preparation clearly here. Preparation's, behind me, but I think there's a real quality to that. Just you got to just believe in what you're doing. Go, go do the best you can. And then maybe after the fact, if you want to analyze it a little, but you have to write something down before you can analyze it. And I do think you can analyze something. I used to have a professor, the one thing from school I did remember, he used to say, we kill to dissect. So you get this piece of book and you kill it so you can dissect it into its parts. And it's like, yeah, so it's like you hate reading it. It's like, I don't want to read. I don't like Moby Dick anyways, but if you try to read Moby Dick dissecting every part, it's painful. It's like, no, this was not fun anymore. And the animal's dead. I don't know what this animal is actually like, but I know it had 3 hearts and there's a coin on the ship of the deck or whatever it might be. So, awesome. Any other thoughts on this topic before we move to the next one here?
I'll only touch on one thing that Steve and I think John were talking about there, which is the newer writer or younger writer trying to find their own voice and overthinking it. And I think part of the problem is that they don't even know the difference between voice and style a lot of the time. And usually, you're trying to write like the last author you read when you're a new writer or your favorite author. And so I agree, don't overthink it. And maybe that's something that MFAs and people who want to be literary writers do more than genre writers. I don't know. Just
for sure. I feel like there's a real professors talking to other professors, with it. And I've talked with a few because I've had a bunch of academic writers on the show and things too. It all, great in their own regards, but there's sometimes, and some of them have agreed when I've brought that up too, because I don't want to put anyone down, but there tends to be I'm writing for other professors as my readers versus a general population kind of readers or just kind of a general person out there. And so it's like having all of these deep Greek, symbols and things. I can't do it. It kills me.
And I don't want to devolve into shtick here. So if I've mentioned this before, I apologize. But the big breakthrough for me, Nathan's Run was my first book, but it was actually the 4th book that I had written. And the big breakthrough for me was literally when I decided to stop trying to be a writer, like writing a book, and just decided to tell the story the way I would tell the story as if I were telling you the story, with using that vernacular and using my regular vocabulary and obviously cleaned up with less stammering. And I don't know if it's funny. You mentioned voice versus style. I don't know that I do know the difference, and I'm not sure I want to know the difference. Steve mentioned that before. You don't want to look under your own hood. One of the things people talk about, what is your method, or what is your writing style, or the process. What's your writing process? No, and I'm not sure I want to overthink it because I'm completely self-taught. And if I do start overthinking it, oh crap! Now it's good. It's like I was never good at golf, but I was okay until I took a lesson, and then I started overthinking it, and it just everything came apart. I was hitting it like a baseball and doing okay, and then it all came apart when I started thinking about the grip.
John, it's funny you mentioned golf. I read a book by George Plimpton years ago. They tell a story about a professional golfer. It might have been Dave Marr. Said he had a good round going one day, and he was walking from hole to hole, and one of the members of the gallery asked if he inhaled or exhaled on his backswing. And Marr said he had never thought about that, but he spent the rest of the day wondering, and he shot about an 84.
Yeah, I believe it completely. It is hard. And then we had on the last, and so Dario and John were on this one. We had Janice on, Janice Hardy, and she loves thinking of it in those terms, and that's how she writes. So, some people it works, but then I think it's all delicate. I don't almost like I have a whole shtick. I'm not going to do it here. I've done it on one of the shows before, but in my writing process where it's just a complete joke. I forget. I think what's the start of it, because I got asked it so many times, but no, it was the start of it is just so you guys know how serious of a writer and as a human I am, is that it's like foreplay interrupted by a jackhammer. So, and then that's a whole stick that goes with that. Yeah, Steve, go ahead.
comment. We talk all this about writing. The first thing you have to do to write is sit down. And I thought about writing a guide to writing, and it would be called The Theory and Practice of the Chair. And so many people, I don't know why. I mean, the true gift may be to come back on Tuesday after a crummy Monday. That might be what really is the difference between a publishable writer and an unpublishable writer. And if you have to do it regularly. And if you're not willing, if you're waiting for inspiration, if you're waiting to understand the symbolic meaning of Bill's attraction to Marilyn, and, if you wait for your feelings to sort of get organized in a way that you can really, if you're not putting words on the page, you're dying. Your life is over. You've got to do the work. And it's one of the things I always emphasize, is probably more autobiographical than it should be, is how you get yourself to do the work. And I think we all have different tricks. And you just, if you cannot do the work, I mean, I always say that when I start a book, 1,000 people with more talent start their books. But 2 years later, when I write the end, they've long since given up. And it's a shame that all that great literature is lost and the world is stuck with my, psycho novels. But that's just the reality of doing the damn work. And that's,
amen. So true.
Amen. And they probably haven't. They probably started those same writers probably started 36 different books.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Well, here's what I hear occasionally is, I know I have this great idea for a book, but darn it, Susan was after me to get the fence fixed, and so that's where my Saturday went. And I smile, and I'm always sympathetic, and yet the truth is, he is the Walking Dead. He will never get the book done if he lets Susan, take charge of his life and keep him from butt in chair or bench. End of story. And it's just, there's really no mercy for the people who can't sit down and do the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we all prioritize that which is important, right? So if you go on social media and people are always lamenting that, how do you find the time to write? And you think, well, okay, in the time it took you to write that question, and then you check back 35 times to find out what the answers are, you could have written a chapter.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Social media is like the death of so many writers. It's just you'll see they're like, I'll look and they'll spend hours on there, and it's just like, I guess if you have the time, but to me, there's also a bit of, you have so much mental bandwidth, right? So there's like, it'd be nice if we could write for 20 hours a day, but you're really realistically not going to. So if you have, some people have 4 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is, this is your bandwidth you have. If you use a chunk of that to go write posts and reply to all your friends, and you spend all of that time doing that, and you only do this little time actually writing your book, well, then, you've carved that down to nothing. And if you're breaking it up to go on all the time, you're even making it worse.
I think of it as concentration, which is depletionary. And you only get so much concentration a month, and you use it.
Yeah.
The most vivid example of this is a sports team that beats another sports team that's 3 levels better. The reason they beat them is because their concentration was extraordinarily high that game. But they almost always inevitably lose the next game. And the reason is they've spent all their concentration beating the Packers, and now they're losing to the Jets. And there's no way they should lose to the Jets, but they just have no concentration left. And so this is also a way I justify not picking up my socks when I go to bed. I say to my wife, Come on, I'm thinking of it. Anyway, it is self-serving, but you do have to preserve that concentration. I always think writer's block is lack of concentration, not lack of talent.
Yeah, I really empathize with that, and it's hard to tell people there's no such thing as writer's block. And the thing, I'm not going to go off on a long sidebar here, by the way, but people think that like the muse has left them. No, it's a matter of priorities.
Yeah.
It's a matter of will. It's a matter of concentration and discipline. The only times I've successfully completed a book, I've started first thing in the morning while the coffee is going, and I'm full of coffee, and I've written until I'm out of words. And it's every morning at that same start, not at weird times of the day, not when I have time, not when I'm not under pressure. And you shut the damn door. And that's hard to do, you know. I think it was Henry James who said the thing you need is a mighty will. And that's really, really the truth. And it's hard going, you know. I get all people's reasons, and sometimes real life crises happen, and that's fair enough. But lack of will and discipline, don't try and write a book.
My thought on writer's block has been for years after having gone to conferences and all. If somebody talks to me about writer's block, I tell them to go talk to a journalist. Ask a journalist about writers.
My dad was one. Yeah, he'd turn in a couple of thousand words every single damn day.
Yep. That's the job. That's the job. And even if you're somebody who's just getting started, you haven't sold a book yet or whatever it is, you have to look at writing as a job and a discipline. I think one of the best things that serves my writing is I spent my childhood and much of the first 15 years or so of my adult life as a professional musician. And when you're a musician, you know there's a couple, 3 hours a day. You just go sit your ass down, shut the door, and practice. Well, I don't play anymore, but I now go in for those couple, 3 hours a day, close the door, sit my ass down, and work on the book. And talking about the muse leaving you, I think it was Stephen King made the comment about finding time to write and finding a place to write. Yes, you will do your best work when the muse is with you. It's a lot easier if the muse knows where and when to find you.
Yeah, he also that's exactly right. And he talks about work ethic a lot in that same section, and both those things are real. And, you know, nowadays, now that, you know, we play with kid gloves. You know, we don't want to hurt new writers or tell them their feelings about writer's block isn't valid, but there's pretty much always a reason for why you're not writing. And it's not a magical one. So, yeah. Anyway, sorry about the side.
Just real quick, the one I like best about writer's block, and it might have been King that said this too, is writer's block is what happens when you try to be a better writer than you are.
Oh, ow.
I actually think I completely disagree with that one, because everything I write, I try to stretch myself. I'm always like, okay, I'm going to try to do this and be better than I am, because that's how you get better at things.
Well,
right?
The thing is, he's not talking about incremental improvements. He's deciding, let's say, if I were going to sit down today and decide, okay, today I'm going to write as well as Dennis Lehane. Well, that ain't going to happen. I can't just decide today to be that much better. I get a little better here and a little better there, and I find my strengths and I find my weaknesses.
He writes a completely different kind of book than you write.
But that's it.
No, literally, it's like...
And I would just be blocked out. I'm not going to be able to do it.
But that's not the kind of book you write. Yeah. But it's not it's not a quality thing. Dennis writes Dennis books. I mean, he's not a, you know what I mean? It's not.
Well, okay, let's take my PI books and decide. Okay, today I'm just going to be as good as Robert Kreis.
Oh, that's not a high bar. He's a hack. Sorry, Bob. Hey, listen, I would like to take one moment and address my fans in New York. I think Stephen Hunter said very disparaging things about the New York Jets. I do not share those feelings. I'm very much a fan of all the football teams. So if you want to read a thriller from someone who respects you, turn to a John Gilstrap book. You don't have to tolerate that level of disrespect from Stephen Hunter. Thank you.
Thanks for the public service announcement there. So I was looking for my Steelers stuff here. I just have to move the camera, but the way it's set up here. So we've got like a very AFC North thing going here. Actually, besides being a fan of all teams, do you have a team you're a fan? Oh, there we go. There's some Steelers stuff. A very partisan crowd.
I don't see how a human being could have an enthusiasm for the New York Jets. What is this? Is this guy from some other planet?
I wonder that every episode with John. Yeah.
Okay, I'm
double down.
No end of advertisement for the Ravens. I did want to mention. We mentioned a magic elixir, and I want to go back and stress it. And that magic elixir is caffeine. Okay. Without caffeine, I'm selling shoes at Sears and wondering where my life went. Actually, I'm retired from selling shoes at Sears. I'm still bitter because I didn't get to be the head of the woman's shoe department at Von Dorman Mall, and that's really, it was so unfair. Anyway, caffeine is, I don't know how anyone lives without it. It's without caffeine, I have no talent at all.
Amen.
Let's all hear it for caffeine. My wife makes superb coffee, so that's what's kept me in the game all these years.
Oh,
and seriously, and not to flog this writer's block thing to death, but I think I know, certainly, Stephen, I know that I wrote at least 10 books, if not more, while I was working a full-time job that was a very busy job. I was traveling a lot, and I was on the road all the time, and it's under contract. I've got an advance I got to pay back if I don't finish it. Within that time frame. Right. Yeah. So you do what you have to do, and there's a certain. Right. And I'm very proud of the books. They're not schlock books. And I think people who are writing on spec, perhaps the folks who have been writing the same chapter for the last 10 years or the same book for the last 10 years, they're not almost perfect.
Go on.
I don't understand that mindset, but you can do what you need to do. And sometimes it's a matter of what you're forced to do. The book I just turned in, Burned Bridges, which again, it won't come out until 25. I am very proud of it. And I wrote 300 pages in the last 2 months because I had made a completely wrong turn. And the deadline is the deadline. And okay, well, you can whine. You get 25 minutes to whine, and then you got to fix it. And somehow it turns out, and you find out there are literally 24 hours in every day. And all you have to do is figure out how to make it work. What do you want? What's your priorities? And then you sort out the priorities. You make it happen. You endure, and then you come out on the other side of it. It's like anything else you want to do.
Yep. No, I thought about that when we were talking about the writing in the morning, is that I do it now. But most of my writing career, I was, besides the last 2 weeks, I was working full time. I had kids, was commuting to things, and it was find whatever spaces you can. And what I used to do was I'd figure out how to get really good at my job, good's maybe not the right word, efficient at what I was required to do. And I would do that. I would make sure I was always ahead on everything I needed to do. And that would allow me some of my work hours to sit and work on it. So, and then, so all that water cooler chatting, I was never big on water cooler chatting and all of that. I still very close to a lot of people I worked with, but we would talk while we were working, while the things were going on. And then that would always give me my little slivers to write. So if you want to do it, you prioritize it, and you find a way. You hear doctors doing it all the time that go write books, and lawyers and everyone else. I forget who it was, but there's, I think, John, you were on that episode with S.J. Roseanne. She was given the example. Someone had wrote all of them on legal pads on a subway. I forget the writer's name, but so there's a way to do it. Was that Thoreau that did as well?
Scott Thoreau.
Scott Thoreau, right.
On the Northwestern Railway from his law practice to his home in Skokie or wherever it was.
Right.
It's not in Skokie anymore. Now it's in Grenoble, Switzerland. But for a while, it was, and he was a working lawyer for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Steve, when you were working at the Sun and then at the Post, and you were writing the book, would you take time off to write the book? Or were you doing that in evenings?
When you talked about how proud you were of writing while working full time, I share that pride because I had a job that demanded a lot of writing, and I don't know. Sometimes I think that if I had gotten the movie job first, I never would have become a novelist because the movie job would have been enough. But I had already published 3 novels when I became the movie job. And we talked about will here, and I'm going to evoke another word. For what I think if you wait for will, if you depend on will, sooner or later, you're not going to have it. And that's dangerous. In my view of it, you've got to make contact. You've got to enter the world of the book every day. So the word I use to describe that is habit, rather than will. It's something you do without thinking. It's like brushing your teeth. And you would not, well, I would, but most people would not go to bed without brushing their teeth. And, so it should be, or hopefully you can get yourself into, or I should say this is autobiographical. Anyway, it's about me. Hopefully I could get myself into doing it without drama, without effort, without letting it occlude my day. And just, at a certain time, drooling, hanging down, looking like a dying basset hound. I stumble into the room and I do the work, and then I forget about it. And that's what works for me. Maybe you have other little games to play. I don't know, but I'd love to hear them. Maybe they're, other writers who are young writers need to hear this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen. Just I had on Ken Liu, who Dario put me in contact with. Really prolific, great fantasy author. And he was like, I usually, and you guys know, you all been in the main show. I don't do the main show. I don't talk a whole lot of writing, right? I'll get to some of it because the joke is that it's writers drinking whiskey, so I'm ethically mandated to have some writing talk with each episode, right? But so, I say that to him. He's like, I want to turn this around on you. What are you good at? Writers never talk about what they're good at. What are you good at? And let's talk about that. And the thing he says it, and I'm like, and my wife, who's actually, if she was here, she would laugh because she would probably agree with this, is that the one thing I'm good at in life, just generally, is I'm incorrigible. So my wife actually, to this day, she's like, I didn't even know we were dating. You say we were dating for this time. I'm like, I didn't even think we were dating, And apparently I'm like, I was like, I don't know. So the joke is when we started, and now I'm like, I don't know. Are we married? I didn't know we got married. Who knew when this started? But that being incorrigible, suffering through things and continuing on, it serves you well in life. It serves you doubly well as a writer, is to get through. And I think Steve made a great point. I think one of the things that gets people hung up so often is just I don't know what the symbolic nature of this is, or what's that, or why am I doing that? It's just right past it. You write past it, it might make sense. And maybe half the time symbolic nature is I think the reader fills in anyways, you can have a reason for it, but everyone brings in their own baggage every time they come to the door to read what you're writing. So you might think it's symbolic of this. Someone could read it and think it's symbolic of a fourth thing. So,
or sometimes the curtains are just blue. It doesn't mean anything.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The writer needs to trust their own subconscious. Oh, I heard that, John.
And I think another thing is hard for new writers in general. Actually, I don't want to go into the generational thing, but the best thing you do, the thing you love, that majority of people who read it are going to love, somebody's going to hate it. It's going to be the worst piece of crap that they've ever read, and they're going to be very vocal about it. And okay, it's just. Get over it. That's the way it goes. And they're going to go and work for Kirkus. So,
there you go. That's what's funny. I think one of the episodes we talked about criticism early on, and I was joking because one of the worst reviews, they just like a random Amazon review, was that my book, A Fire for Christmas. The conceit is that these two writers writing letters to each other during the pandemic, and the guy wants to write them on a typewriter. And so he's writing them on a typewriter, but he's so immersed in modern ways of communication that he keeps writing out what the emojis would be that are there. So it gets progressively, it's a satire, it's absurdist at different times. It gets progressively more ridiculous, the emojis he writes down. And someone did not get that that's what was happening, even though it's pretty clear this was happening. And oh my gosh, it was like this long, like 3-paragraph rant, like, Mr. Hincy, you should know. And who let you do that? And I was like, oh man, that they really did not get the bit there. So,
as a great writer I know once said, there's an idiot reader for every book.
Have we discussed on this show that I actually won an award? International Thriller Writers gave me an award for the worst review ever. It was, yes, it was for Nathan's Run. I remember it verbatim. I don't remember a lot of the good ones, but this was for Nathan's Run, and it was. The binding, I would tell you, the wherever they sent to be bound left a lot of excess glue for whatever on some of the print runs. So the glue boogers in the binding are more captivating than Gilstrap's torpid prose. That was in Syracuse, New York.
Right.
1996.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That person could be a film critic one day. I think they got the makings. That's a good time. Yeah. So the question is when do you feel like a writer is being manipulative versus like persuasive?
Okay, I do have an answer, and then I will check out. The answer is if you came to me and you said, Steve, this book is way too manipulative. What are you going to do about it? My answer would be publish it. Because if we work in the thriller world, our readers expect, and we were attracted to that world because of those manipulations. And the trick is to find some way to disguise the manipulation from the reader so he thinks it's something else. For example, in Psycho, Hitchcock films the murder of Arbogast from on top. And you think, oh, wow, that's he said the old masters found a new way to show him. But that's not it at all. The reason he did that was so that you wouldn't see the face of Norman's mother and realize that Norman is Norman's mother. And that's sort of the ideal model of the manipulation. But I have no shame in some really low-ranking, scuzzy manipulation. The only way my hero could get out would be if it started to snow at 6:19 p.m. and damn it, right at 6:19 p.m. it started to snow. And that's what we do. The trick again, balance. Try to find a way to make it not obvious that you're rattling the curtains. Make it instead seem to be part of some other aspect of the book.
I don't know that I consider the example Steve just gave as being manipulation. I think to me that falls on the category of plotting. To me, when I feel like I'm being falls on the category of plotting, just making things work out. To me, manipulation is when the author is working overtime, making sure I feel the way he wants me to feel or she wants me to feel. And that will turn me off the book. If the book's written well and the writer's done their homework and they just lay things out for you and have certain characters say certain things and do things, and they should be able to bring you around to how they'd like you to feel. But it'll turn me off and I feel manipulated when they just tell me. That's why I watch very little commercial television, because I find all the shows are just telling me, here's how you should feel. And my thought is, I'll tell you what, you tell me a story and I'll make up my mind how I feel. And to me, that's what I think of as manipulation.
I think that a book is an engineered product, and it's all manipulation. It's all sleight of hand, in the sense that pacing is engineering. Movies have a soundtrack to help out with how you're supposed to feel. We don't have that, so we have the syntax of the language, and the sense of pacing is aided by shorter sentences and by shorter paragraphs. For me, I mean, the gospel according to me. But all of that is manipulation. When it comes time, if I want to make, to Dana's point, if I want to make the audience cry, or if I want to make the audience laugh, that is manipulated. Of course it is, because, they're just spots on the page. But the trick is to do it subtly enough that you don't see it. And it's not, it comes from off stage, as it were. I've often said, I don't know if this is a good example or not. If you go to a funeral and people cry, funerals are emotional things, and you feel for them. What tears your heart out is that guy at the lectern, or the lady at the lectern, the kid at the lectern who's trying so desperately not to cry. It's the subdued emotion that just rips your heart out. And for me, there's an equivalent to that in fiction. You hold it back. You let the reader feel it through the character. But if you cross that line, I think that's what you're talking about, Dana. If you cross that line and you say, okay, this is what you're supposed to feel, you kind of break the spell.
Yes.
And to Steve's point, it's balance. And that's where the artistry comes in, where the talent comes in, whatever is the right word, journeymanship comes in. And how do you make that done? But it's all manipulation.
For sure. Because like you said, it's an engineered product. I think it's, and that's why I was trying to get at it from like the reader's perspective, right? Like, when do you feel like, and for me, I think you both hit on it. Especially things that are didactic, like the preachy things, and you suddenly realize like, oh, they're trying to preach this very specific thing to you, and then so it's like, oh, there's this cacophony of catastrophe that happens, and it's like, oh, and I was like, a girl that died, oh, she just got a scholarship, and oh yeah, it's like you just keep adding and adding and adding, and so then as a reader or as a viewer or whatever, the spell's broken and you go, oh no, you're just trying to manipulate me into this, like in that case, this political leaning or whatever it might be, right? You want to, whatever, I don't even want to bring up whatever political thing that the person's trying to get at, that they're trying to get at. You see it and then you feel like, oh no, you're just trying to manipulate me, versus it is. I mean, you're writing it. It is all engineered, and writer gets to time travel back and forth through it and make it say whatever they say before it's delivered to you. But I think that's what gets me is a lot of times is the preachy stuff. It's like, oh no, you suddenly realize, oh no, this is just all about that. And then the spell's completely broken.
Here's what bothers me. Every book I write, because I write not really political thrillers, or kind of political thriller, but not really. It's about justice. The good guys always win. And pretty much every book has that speech. Either it's the point of view, silent speech, or it's the truth, justice, and American way speech. It's the one I write for me. And as I'm writing it, I know this isn't going to survive. It makes me feel good. And then tomorrow I'll cut it out because I know it stops the story. The problem is not all authors cut it out. And I won't name names. None of them are on my screen right now. But a lot of authors don't do that, and they leave that in, and it just turns off for you. It turns me off. But it's you can't let the agenda show.
Let's let Dario finish us off. He hasn't spoken in quite a while, so
I've been listening, rapt. I'm absolutely rapt.
Oh,
thank you, Steve. This is I'm really interested in how granular some of the answers have been, because yes, it is all manipulation at its core. But I guess, and I think William touched on this, there's a threshold at which we all start feeling uncomfortable. And I think Bill and I are probably fairly aligned on this. He talked about, can't remember the term he used. To me, it's to do with tropes, and being cheap. When a writer or screenwriter especially reaches for a cheap trope because it's worked and it gets people, the majority of people, in the gut, then I think they're being manipulative. So if I go to the movies and the hero, if I go to a movie and the subplot is that the hero and his estranged family get back together after he saves the day, I feel I'm being manipulated. I hate that. I hate those cheap tropes that are invoked to make us feel. And I think that the way to make the reader feel is to get them immersed, as we were saying before, in the character and get them to care so much about the character that the story does it. I don't want off-the-shelf tropes. I don't want that. I don't want to see that. And I think it's very common.
What? Awesome. Anyone else?
Did I upset anyone there?
Did I just hear you don't like happy endings?
No, I actually do. I really like happy endings, but I almost like ambiguous endings even more. But I don't see that's, for me, that's not to do with the manipulative thing. No, I love happy endings. That's my preference.
I think what I'm taking away is what we're looking for here is we're right. Everything we're doing at some level is manipulating the reader to get what we want done. But I think if nothing else, it should be, or at least seem, organic to the story. The way it and hidden all the machinery and hidden all the other stuff. So the reader's allowed to think this is just what actually happened and here's how I feel about it, as opposed to feeling the author's hand on his or her shoulder, guiding them where they want to go. It's kind of where I think we're sort of coming down on that. It all has to look organic.
I totally agree with that. And I think that's a problem with, it's maybe more of a problem for the author and maybe even more for the editor, because we see the strings being pulled all the time. So our threshold mine is way, way down.
Well, there's a formal term for what we're talking about here, deus ex machina, the God in the machine. When it's done so without artistry that it becomes obvious, and it's like mechanical. It's like you can see the little man, pay no attention to the little man in the curtain, behind the curtain, except that the only thing you can see is the man behind the curtain, and that's death to the story. Again, I balance smoothness, find some way to do it where it's not, do better than the snowstorm of writing at 6:13 p.m. You can all do better than that.
Right. Amen. Well, and at least if you do, when you edit it, just foreshadow that snowstorm is on its way, so that it makes a little sense that the snowstorm is there now. So
or change the setting away from Florida in June.
Awesome. Anything else? If not, we can call it a show.
Let's call it a show. I enjoyed this very much, even though I want to get a real drink of whiskey, but I thank you all very much. I enjoyed chatting with every one of you.
Round 3, so second screen content. So if you guys haven't heard of this, I just
is this metaphorical or literal?
This is what they call it. This is literally what they're calling it. So and this is streaming that. I think Netflix was one that was put out a call to like a job call basically for this. And so it's basically what they want, shows that are less engaging. So people basically say you can peruse your phone and not lose track of the plot. So it's like, cheap plots, not cheap, but just not complicated plots. So you're basically writing as background noise. So what do you guys think of that development?
Hey, Mom,
generally?
I just got a job. I have to write uninteresting things that are going to be in the background that won't distract anybody from the things that interest them. Hey.
Well, I have to admit, yeah, if that's what Netflix is going for, they've done a damn good job lately.
I mean, that might actually be what it is. Like, this is, I mean, if I'm learning about it, because I'm not exactly like, trying to keep my pulse on it, right? I try to pay attention and try to get content for the show, but I'm also not trying to read the job things or, talking with people that are on the, in the know exactly for all of it. So, I mean, it's kind of an open-ended question, just like, what are your guys' thoughts on that? What are, and how do you think this could affect? So that's mostly like a TV thing. But, this stuff ends up, all of that entertainment time span, right? Entertainment budget, it all kind of goes into one place. So I think it could affect, writers of the written word, at some point, certainly. So, what do you guys think about it? Anyone who wants to jump in, you can jump in.
I'm clearly not one of the people with the money who makes those kinds of decisions, but I would consider it a challenge. I would want to try to make my story so interesting. They'll put the damn phone down. They're going to realize, hey, I'm missing stuff. Let's put the phone down, because my thought would be down the road, people are going to figure out, why am I paying for a subscription service to provide background noise? I have music. I have other things I can play. Why am I paying these guys, whatever they are, $20 a month now, so I can not pay attention to their shows? I just won't watch them. I think it's ultimately going to be self-defeating.
Right. Well, and you could go on YouTube and just turn on, some background noise. I think when I first heard it, I was like, there's certain shows that we turn on, like my wife and I's kind of becomes our background noise. They're like Modern Family, right? We love that show, Modern Family, but we've watched it a bunch. So it's one of those things. I already know what happens. I know where it is. I can pay attention a little bit here and get a funny joke, see the characters I know. But if it's ever the new shows where we zone out, we end up like, we may try to watch that episode again to kind of remember what happened. But those are the shows we end up not watching. They never actually become our background noise.
Right.
It's something we love that is, is usually lighthearted enough that we can throw it on the back. So it's a lot of sitcoms, kind of something lighthearted we can kind of put in the background as we're doing laundry, doing whatever. And then, we tune in, we kind of laugh for a minute and go about, whatever we're doing. But the idea of creating content for that seems a little misguided at best, but it is what it is. Dario, were you starting to say something?
I think the problem is going to be stopping me. I think death's too good for them. The idea is just mind blowing, and I'd heard about it before that you mentioned it on the show, Bill. About a year ago, I read an article on this. It may have been in the New York Times, but the statistics are amazing. Of course, it's mostly Gen Z, but seem to remember it was over 90% of Gen Zers feel that way. They want less engaging content because they're always scrolling their phones. And it does percolate down even into older people. I mean, the problem is for screenwriters who have to make a living.
I'm sorry, were you saying something?
Oh dear.
I'm sorry, I interrupt. That was rude.
No, it's funny. And that's exactly it. The problem is, for those screenwriters who have to make a living and actually deliver this shit, the rest of us should just say, go to hell, and here's where you can put it. Because, and I think it's a pendulum swing. I think we'll come around it eventually. Things will get so uninteresting that people will start canceling subscriptions or whatever, or viewership will go down and they'll start making more engaging shows. But I find the whole, again, it's 21st century has to go,
I'm not done with it yet, but I'm invested in it at this point. Give me,
I could sell you timeshares in my time machine. Yeah, I mean, it's just vile. The concept just blows my mind.
Right.
Well,
I think
the
it's an
concept,
AI
it's
thing too. That's where they're going to plug in AI pretty easily. Make me something that's not very engaging, and here is the robots are going to do that really easily.
Well, I'm with Dana. I mean, I watch virtually zero TV and very, very few movies, and I don't have that need for visual content. You know, or visual muzak, I think they called it in that article. You know, if I want something in the background, I'll either put on some music or I'll listen to, you know, podcast maybe of this show.
Wow, that's
There are
cool.
lots of them. You know, why would I want something visual on when I'm doing something else? I don't function that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather read 10 pages of text than watch 2 minutes of video. That's me. I'm not a Gen Zer, obviously.
Very good, Johnny. Well, I know you're trying to chime in there.
Yeah, several things occurred right there. I can't work with anything really distracting. I have discovered there's a noise generator that it's coffee shop sounds, that just kind of random clanking of dishes and stuff that's in the background, and that's what I write to.
Oh,
okay.
It drowns out the sounds in the house, and but you know, I have mixed minds. If they're in fact employing writers to write this stuff, you got employed writers, so that's a good thing. It's a little soul stealing, but if it's the movie business, so you've sort of signed that contract. You've already signed away the soul.
Once you step forth into Hollywood, your soul was gone anyways.
And that's the deal. You know, we've established who you are, and I am one, right? It would just now we're haggling over the price. So that's the good part of it. You know, if people don't want to watch it, don't watch it. It's certainly not something I get annoyed by the chyron at the bottom of news programs.
yeah.
So I'm certainly not. I can't imagine that in something that is dramatic. I do watch. I haven't watched the alphabet networks in years, but some of the streaming stuff on Netflix and actually Apple TV Plus, I get whatever that network is. So that's been very engaging. Masters of the Air and some of those others. So you know, I do enjoy that. It's a great way to end the day. I spend all day in my head, and it's kind of nice to relax and see something else. Reading, I don't read as much, quite honestly, as I used to. But we have a puppy who doesn't like me to read. She likes to be between me and the book. So, I to each their own. And if it employs writers, you know, why not? I don't get it. I deeply don't understand it. And to target an industry toward uninteresting things is kind of
Unreal, isn't it? It's
I mean, it's self-immolatory. You know, it's kind of
Right.
it ain't going to last. But you know, we had. You know what? I grew up at a time when the people made millions of bucks off pet rocks. So, you know, if it works, do it.
Hey, man. Well, you know what's funny is that one of the most popular shows this past year was Shogun on Hulu. Got tons of ratings, got great reviews. We haven't finished watching it, but it's subtitles. So I started watching it with my 12-year-old because I'm like, oh, this might be an interesting show. And me and him loved it. So then we roped my wife in to watch it with us. Actually, I say 12-year-old. My son's 13 now, but and it's because there's subtitles. You can't like not focus. And I think there's something magical to it. So I think it's we'll see how it plays out. I think it's probably the wrong lessons learned. I think at one point The Office was like the #1 streaming show. And so it's like, oh, well, The Office, it's not complicated plots. It's like, no, it's that people watched it and they enjoy it and they get to kind of come back. And yeah, that can be on while you're doing it. But I'm with Dario, actually. I listen to tons of podcasts now. When I go work out, I throw a podcast, I have earbuds in, I turn a podcast on, I listen to it. And it's usually about something kooky, like lots of Bigfoots and UFOs and stuff. I go listen to that stuff. And that's my second screen. I don't have, I guess it's no screen content. I just do that yard work, a lot of, so I like to listen to things. But I'm with you, John. Actually, I do my last book was pretty much completely written with the soundtrack of Braveheart. So, and anyone that's seen
It's
the show,
like writing a love scene to the soundtrack to Braveheart. You know,
well, actually, some of it you probably could. The soundtrack's actually it's a nice soundtrack, but there's no words. As I don't like words if I'm trying. I need some background noise to kind of block everything, and no words, and just like some instrumentals. So I'll go whatever instrumental and listen to that while I write. But
I can't even really do music. I wish I could, but definitely not music with words. And even, I get wrapped up in the rhythms. If I'm listening to music, I have to have silence. But, at the opposite end of the scale from second screen content, I'm old enough to remember in the probably mid 80s in England when the BBC produced the George Smiley series by John le Carré. And I think each book was made in 6 one-hour episodes. And I remember you needed such high focus that I think I didn't know it was on at the beginning. And I called a friend, and she virtually screamed at me because she was missing a minute of it.
mm-hmm.
I think we really need to encourage people to focus intensely. I love high focus. I love getting totally lost in something. It makes me feel very, very good.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Amen. Awesome. Any other thoughts on it?
No, the high focus thing, having just finished a book. That's when you find that zone, which in this case forced because I was on a very tight deadline as it turns out, and the zone comes when it has to or when it just arrives. It's a magical thing, hours go by in minutes, and of course you can't see past the length of your arm by the time it's done. There are physical issues. It's hard to stand up straight when it's all done and all of that, but it's magical and it's exhausting. We talked before about, with young writers and all, people don't understand. I mean, it's not, I was a firefighter, so it's not exhausting that way physically, but it's finding that zone and finding that level of concentration is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Yeah. It's one of those things. Sometimes you have to fight through to get there. So I know sometimes I wake up, that first part is, I heard some corporate world called it, what was the term they were using? Like deep work or something like that. But it's like that sometimes you got to sit your butt down. Like, Steve was saying, they sit your butt down and then work. And then, but once you break through that, like, your brain going, this is hard, just go away from it. When you break through and you're really into it, I love writing. I know sometimes you're writers that don't. I love it. Once I'm in it, it's great. But it is by the time it's out. It's the idea. That's why I don't like the social media part. I don't get, because I'm like, the idea of now I'm going to go spend 2 hours and, focus on all this. It's like my focus. I'm like, just using language. I think sometimes I'm like, might be like that anyways, but.
Yeah, I'm one of those writers you mentioned who hates writing, which is why I don't do it all the time. But the thing I find the highest focus of as you know, I do some book design and interior formatting. I get totally lost when I'm working on text formatting and in design for a print book. I just forget the time. I forget to drink. I forget to eat. Different things. And I've had times when I've been writing where I get to that zone, but it's rarer for me. But I think we're subject to so many distractions, and the internet and smartphones are the worst. The books the 2 novels I wrote on a laptop with a broken Ethernet port. I couldn't connect to the internet. You go and research something for 5 minutes and you're gone for 2 hours, and that's your writing day gone. So I think we just live in a world of distractions.
Right. Yeah. There's the figuring out how to get rid of them, and if you want to write it. And so, and I guess now you can be the writer that figures out how you're like the less distracting, so amen. Make that money, and you still want to afford a house in California, but awesome. Well, any final closing thoughts anyone has?
Oh, just great show as always. Always a lot of fun.
I had a ball.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Extra shots. You knew it was coming if you watched any episodes before. Question for the audience here. What was my question going to be? I don't know, but I did write it down, so I'm going to read it. So what is your favorite second screen content? So we talked about second screen content, and of course, everything is the end of the world because, writers, we feel that way pretty often. But what is yours? So I mentioned mine's probably Modern Family right now. We've also went down the Schitt's Creek as our second screen because after we watched all of it, it became very comforting to kind of leave that on and like occasionally catch him, checking with the characters and have a laugh. What is yours? Let us know down there, comment section. As always, you want to support the show. You have a lot of great writers on here. If you're into thrillers, you're into private investigators, anything you want, you'll find them on here. So really, it's the best way if you would, pick up a book and make it your first and only screen-ish content. It's appreciated. So thanks so much for tuning in, and cheers, everybody.